Yeah. Let's go back to your book, Closer Encounters. You mentioned that you published the book as an alternative to the description of what's happening that's coming from the US government. What is your description? What is your perspective about what is happening? What are these machines? What are these entities behind these machines?
So first of all, I engage with the full range of data, meaning that the book talks about abductions, right? I mean, the UAP report said nothing about close encounters, even of the second kind, let alone close encounters of the third and the fourth kind, right? The report was focused on what are called close encounters of the first kind, which are UFO sightings, or the tracking of UFO by radar or something. Close encounters of the second kind are when a UFO lands and leaves traces like landing gear marks or radioactive traces in the places where it landed, things like that. Close encounters of the third kind are when beings or entities are seen in association with UFOs, and then the fourth kind are abductions. And so I deal with the full range of close encounters in this book, and that's one huge point of divergence from the UAP report. And I think that eventually we will hear from the government about abductions and implants and mutilations and the other subjects that I discussed, but we'll hear about it at a time and in a way that suits their purposes in terms of rolling out this, global totalitarian system. And so one of the things that I argue in this book is that we're probably eventually going to be given a narrative that there are the good guys and there are the bad guys. And, you've got these nefarious gray aliens here who are abducting your children in the middle of the night, and they're implanting you, and they're responsible for cattle mutilations. But then there are these beautiful, blonde, tall, white ancestors who, created us in distant antiquity. And, we are their offspring, and they're our great ancestors, to put it in the language of Chinese Confucianism. And they are going to protect us from this, diabolical enemy that's coming here and, abducting people in the middle of the night and so on. And the whole thing is a good cop, bad cop routine. It's a hydra. It's one entity with two or more heads, and it's being used to create a false alternative in order to get us to submit to a control system that already, I argue, has shaped, the religious beliefs of the majority of humanity. One of the lines of argument in Closer Encounters is that the quote-unquote revealed religions are actually, psychosocial control mechanisms put in place by the beings behind this phenomenon. And so I argue in this book that instead of, falling prey to this good cop, bad cop routine, we ought to take a closer look at, who exactly these beings are and, what exactly the nature of the control system that we're ensconced in is. And my thesis is that what we're really dealing with here are not aliens coming from, Zeta Reticuli, or like being caught in a war between two different alien races. What we're dealing with here is the deleterious effects of a group of human time travelers on the continuum of our history. That time travel was achieved at a certain point in human history, and that the people who achieved time travel technology, the people who harnessed zero-point energy and constructed anti-gravity propulsion systems and vehicles that also are time machines, those people effectively set themselves up as gods over the rest of us by being able to deal with the variables of human history on a fifth dimensional level. In other words, to tinker with our 4D history from a higher dimensional vantage point. And that's really the nature of the problem. And that's why, we shouldn't expect any disclosure from any of our governments, any of the governments of the leading world powers, because this is not a question of the defense of humanity from some alien entity. It's a question of being inside of an invisible control system set up by humanity to oppress humanity.
Would you say that they're traveling back in time to change something in the future? Or they're just doing it to, like, what is the purpose? If they've already achieved the God status and God capability.
Yeah. What's the purpose of any political system for the people who lead it, right? Once you are operating on a fifth dimensional level and you have, 0-point energy that allows you to traverse space-time and set up societies that you control in different epochs, well, why would you operate with any logic other than the logic of colonialism and mass oppression that's determined most of human history, right? I mean, what we're dealing with are people with the same colonial mentality that the British Empire had, except they have time travel technology. And, they see the majority of the human population as an animal farm, as a herd that they want to maintain control over. And they have all these beautiful justifications for it, which I get into in my book. Like, for example, that there's a cosmic order and they are higher evolved beings who are creating a microcosm of the cosmic order, which allows people with a low level of consciousness to cultivate themselves lifetime after lifetime through duty and service in their respective caste so that they can ultimately, make their way up to the rung of the system that these putative gods see themselves as belonging on.
Cosmic experts.
Yeah, exact. Cosmic experts, the Brahmins of the old Hindu caste system.
Right.
And so, and look, the British colonialists thought this way too, about the Indian population and various Africans that they governed. So, with reference to Charles Fort, among other people, I argue that effectively we're colonized. We're in a colonial system. And we're also in a system that resembles a farm, where we're being tagged like animals and monitored. And again, they'll provide all kinds of sophisticated justifications for this, but really it's because they're sadists and they're drunk on their own power, like the governors of any colonial system.
And no, go ahead. And there are people in our timeline right now that you would say are in contact with them and are aware of this dynamic?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that even the people involved in the UAP preliminary assessment at the highest level know exactly what's going on. When the Office of Naval Intelligence is audited by the Senate to hand over its entire dossier of close encounter reports going back to the 1940s, and they come back and they talk about the Omaha and this one and that one from 2000 and 2000, the Nimitz and the Omaha from like 2004, 2007. That's all they have to give. Well, listen, an executive decision was made at some level by somebody who knows what's going on, who's got all the data in front of him, who basically said, yeah, well, to Congress, we'll hand over what we want to hand over that allows us to spin this in a way that protects the plan, that protects the overall plan. And so, yes, I think that there are liaisons, at a high level in the Navy and other branches of the military. There are liaisons who are meeting with members of this, what I call the Nordic breakaway civilization, a time-traveling breakaway civilization that's operating on a hyperdimensional level.
Are these the same as lizard people?
I get into that briefly in this book. I'm not convinced that these quote-unquote reptilians are actually aliens. If you consider our own genetic engineering capabilities right now, let alone what they'll be, on the other side of the technological singularity in a generation, even now in the top laboratories in the world, we could take dinosaur DNA, which we have. I mean, this is the Jurassic Park scenario, right? We could take dinosaur DNA and splice it with human DNA, particularly if you take the DNA of something like a Deinonychus, which was a 5-foot-tall bipedal dinosaur with opposable thumbs and binocular vision, and you splice it with human DNA, you can create a reptilian humanoid. And I think it's possible that entities like that, like the so-called reptilians, are really products of a kind of Frankenstein's laboratory, not necessarily, aliens coming here from somewhere else.
Have you heard of stoned ape theory?
Yes.
Terence McKenna. So that's very interesting because the argument is that our brain evolved much faster than the rest of our body. And some people are saying that actually the modern humans are the result of being genetically modified by extraterrestrial, or maybe, as you were saying, humans who are time traveling from the future. But numerous amount of psychedelic experiences. And on some of the substances like DMT, you encounter some of these beings that it's really pointless to even talk about it because it's beyond words what is happening, but it seems more real than this dimension or this reality, however you want to define it. Do you see any kind of a alignment between these interests and some of the substances that are available on this planet, like psychedelic substances? And perhaps that could be the reason that we have evolved the way we have evolved for the past tens of thousands of years.
Well, it's a complex question, but yes, I do. In my book, In Closer Encounters, and this is a line of argument that I already began to unfold in Prometheism, I argue that we're living in a quantum computational system, that the cosmos is like a gigantic quantum computer.
Simulation?
And the problem with the word simulation is that it implies that there's a reality and that this is a simulacrum of that reality. Whereas what I actually think is going on is that it's just the nature of the cosmos to be a computational system. And there are many nested programs inside this system. So, you could say it's like a simulation within a simulation within a simulation, but there's no original that this is a simulacrum of. Information and substances like DMT, I think, are hacks to get to a higher reference level inside the information processing system. That there's a wider cyberspace beyond the parameters of the reality that we're inside of, beyond the limits of the program that we are functioning in the context of right now. And that substances like DMT or other psychedelics basically allow you an access portal to another level of cyberspace. And that these beings like reptilians and mantids and so forth that are seen in that level, on that dimension, if you want to put it in that language, are beings that know how to use this technology, namely the technology of psychedelics, in order to navigate the cyberspace more effectively than we can. And so I suspect that part of the metaphor of the forbidden fruit in Eden, which we find in the book of Genesis, is that, at least some part of that was exposure to psychedelics, that there was a kind of Promethean rebel faction within the breakaway civilization, the Titans, as it were, who, split with the gods and became advocates of humanity, Titans like Prometheus. Or in an Iranian context, Ahura Mazda, okay, or Mithra or something.
I was actually going to ask you if Ahura Mazda is the same as Prometheus.
Short answer, yes.
All right.
And so I think that, part of the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge was, psychedelics and its transformative potential for human consciousness.
Yeah, John